Hello, Assalamualaikum. Good morning, everyone. Hi, let me introduce myself before we start our event. My name is Nur Najwa from Malaysia Timber Council, and I am the moderator for today's webinar session. So first of all, welcome to the Malaysian Timber Council MTC Timber Talk series for 2020. I would like to thank everyone for taking time to join our session today, and I hope that everyone is doing great. So before we start, let me know, where are you guys come from? From which organization? From which industry? Your name or your designation? I need to know a bit about our participant audience today. Let me know from your answer. Put it inside your chat box. Okay. Ridwan, Veritas Architect. Veritas also Miguel. Edmund, Atlas Industry, MWMJC. Hi, LEC. Plywood Manufacturing Sabah, Simon Law. Architect Shilpa, Teck Beng Lim. Oh, okay. Okay, Hasif. Oh, Hasif MTCC. Hello. Okay, Andrew, GBI. Hello, Andrew, Gunung Seraya. Mr. Yan, MTIB, Sunita. Hi. Architect Norman. Okay, Selamat, Seremban. Okay, interesting. We have a few from the industry, from architecture, from the team industry as well. IOI Palmwood, Mr. Peter Fitch. Okay, Azelan, MTIB. Zainal Abidin, SME Malaysia. Okay, GBC. Seh Ban Eng. Hello. Okay. Thank you everyone from MNC, Nick Wee. Okay. Thank you everyone for your responses. It is great to know that we have a diverse audience participation today. So let's start our session. For your information, this is our fourth and final webinar session for the year. And if you are keen to know about our previous webinar session, you can also see our video recording, which is available in MTC's YouTube channel called MTC Timber TV. So do check it out. Like, share, and as well as subscribe to our channel to gain better knowledge from this webinar, as well as various inspiring and informative videos uploaded on MTC's YouTube channel. So please check MTC Timber TV, yeah? And before we begin our session, I have a few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions for the presentation, for the presenter, please submit your questions by typing the questions into the Q&A box on your screen. And also, you can also use the chat feature in the Zoom to put on your questions as well. And then today's session is being recorded and available in our YouTube channel later. And if you require certificate of attendance for this session, please let me know by sending your email request to nurnajwa@mtc.com.ny. I will later put on my email address inside the chat box. So please email me if you need any certificate of attendance, yeah? And also, let's proceed with our next agenda of the day. Now I would like to welcome our Malaysia Timber Council CEO, Mr. Muhtar Suhaili, to deliver his welcoming remarks. The floor is yours, Mr. Muhtar.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everyone. Thank you very much, Najwa, one of our prominent MCs in MTC, for moderating today's session. And a warm welcome to all the attendees. From the responses that we received just now, we could see various parties are joining our webinar today, from architect firms, from associations, from industry players, even from our sister agencies like MTIB and MTCC. I would like to thank all of you for taking your time despite your busy schedules to join this session. I think everybody is now in Malaysia, very passionate what will be next for the new Prime Minister of Malaysia at 10 p.m. As well as interestingly, some of you are busy watching World Cup. Yeah. Yesterday we have interestingly, Saudi Arabia managed to defeat Argentina 2-1. It's another surprise. So it looks like in today's world there's so many surprises, by the way. Anyway, that's just my introduction. So first of all, once again, welcome to this the fourth webinar for this year, organized by MTC. And for the past three webinars, we have invited prominent architects and those relevant to the industry to talk about timber and as well as the usage of timber. And today we are very fortunate to have architect Lillian Te. Thank you very much, Lillian, for joining us, who is the Vice President of Veritas Design Group, who's from her CV here, the main responsibility including overseeing design that aspires to create responsible, sustainable, and resilient architectures. She's a prominent architect with over 3 decades of experience in the field of architecture. It is indeed a pleasure to have you today, Lillian. And today we are going to talk about timber beyond green buildings. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this year is a very busy schedule for MTC. I visited more than 15 countries this year to see how we can expand our timber trade between Malaysia and the world. And we could see that actually, interestingly, there are more and more countries now moving towards green buildings. And one of the most sustainable, not one of the most sustainable, but the most sustainable building materials is actually timber, where it's a renewable, where you can recycle the materials. And in more and more countries now in Europe, in Australia, in a few other parts of the world, is now trying to encourage builders, construction companies, as well as architects to use timber as part of the sustainable way forward for the construction industry. So I hope that by having this webinar today, the keywords is all about green, all about sustainable, and what I call this, all about to see how we can use more timber in the construction or design sectors, especially in Malaysia, because we can see that in Malaysia now, maybe there are some more efforts need to be done before we can get buy-ins from the relevant stakeholders. But I believe MTC, as the council entrusted to promote and to market Malaysian timber and timber products, we need to do our part to encourage, to advertise, to let people use timber as part of their activities. Yeah. So that's why I think the keywords sustainable is very important. With MTCC reps here, I would also like to stress that it's important to ensure that the logs or the timbers or lumbers that we are using is sustainably sourced, and if it's from the legally sourced, and then I'm sure MTCC, where we have this MTCS, Malaysian Timber Certification Scheme, which is endorsed by PEFC, Program for Endorsement of Forest Certification, should be one of the way forward to ensure the sustainability of our industry, forestry management, as well as timber industry. So I don't want to prolong my speech. And I would like to apologize as well because I cannot make it until the end of the session today. There are a few meetings outlined in my calendar today. And I'm really happy to see the participations of today's webinar. We have 65 now online to join us this webinar. And Lillian Te, thank you very much once again for agreeing to be with us today, to be our guest for today. And I wish all of you a fruitful session, a very great session ahead. Najwa, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuan Mota, for the welcoming remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to our main agenda for today. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, who is going to present a topic titled Beyond Green Buildings. Our speaker today, architect Lillian Te, which is the principal from Veritas Architects Sdn Bhd, has over 3 decades of experience in the field of architecture. She trained as both a civil engineer and architect and obtained her Bachelor of Science in Engineering and Master of Architecture from Princeton University in 1990. Her notable projects include W Hotel, Oxley Towers, Star Residence, Kuala Lumpur MRT stations, at Museum, Pasar Seni, Stadium Merdeka, and Bukit Bintang. Other award-winning accomplishments includes DG headquarters in Subang High Tech Park and Putrajaya Western Transport Terminal. Lillian also dedicates her time to smaller scale projects such as Singke Hotel, which won the International Cityscape Awards 2016, Hospitality and Leisure, and also awarded Building of the Year Award 2015 by Malaysia Institute of Architects, PAM. She also served as PAM Deputy President in 2015, also Vice President 2017 until 2019, and also the President of PAM from 2019 to 2020. So without further ado, I would like to invite Architect Lillian to deliver her presentation. Over to you, Lillian, the floor is yours. You are on mute, Lillian.
Yeah. Then I put you on.
No, it's okay, I think.
Oh, it's okay.
You're seeing the screen, Naja?
Yeah, good.
Okay, great. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time to join me on this talk. I hope it will be a conversation, really, at the end. I look forward to the Q&A, really more than the presentation. Thank you to Malaysian Timber Council, Tuan Haji Mokhtar and his team for kindly inviting me to share our experience in our journey on green buildings and sustainability. I'm really most honored, actually. This is the first time I have had a chance to speak at the MTC, and I hope I'm able to share and raise some questions for discussion. Okay. I think the topic, oops, can you see the screen? My screen has, okay. Okay, the topic I think in this series is about green buildings and of course the role that MTC could play in developing greener buildings, more sustainable construction and building types for our local industry and market. But what I would like to speak today is to look at the issues beyond green building. I think green building have been with us already since quite a while, and even certification. We are now 13 years since the Green Building Index was initiated in 2009, which set quantitative parameters for us to gauge the performance of green buildings. I believe now there is a need for greater focus on the qualitative aspects and also increasing and continuing advocacy to convert more people to be committed towards the green agenda. And of course, that leading to the larger agenda of addressing climate change. Of course, at the end of the day, all of this is actually aspiring for better quality of life, particularly urban life, because the world is increasingly urbanized with, I think today, around 57% of the global population live in urbanized areas. And by 2050, it's projected up to 70% would be living in cities. And hence, it's quite important to address particularly the issue of sustainable building in cities, I believe. Of course, as architects, besides the quantitative targets that we need to achieve for green buildings, we are always, of course, interested in maintaining the aspirations that we always have in our design, things that are, we feel, important to communities and to the people that we build for, aspects of cultural identity, cultural connection, placemaking. So we're not just doing functional buildings, but buildings that will engage and uplift people's lives. And in recent years, and especially in Kuala Lumpur, we are more aware of the urban conditions and how to achieve better urban spaces and to make our cities more livable. At all times, we of course want to ensure that there is a strong sense of connection of the community to the built environment, to our cities and what they stand for, and that the built environment will be able to sustain good, healthy lifestyles. Okay, so and recently, of course, we are all aware that it's everyone's task and responsibility to do their bit towards climate change to ensure the survival of the planet. I want to draw your attention to the fact that we all know that building green is not something new that we have to learn. It's something that had been with us for a long time. And our traditional buildings, our vernacular buildings were already quite green before the onset and formalization of green buildings. Our vernacular buildings, we are all familiar with the townhouses in our cities, the traditional homes in the kampong, the Malay house that we see everywhere. These building types are actually quite green, and we have a lot of lessons that we can learn from the wisdom of vernacular building traditions, which were, our traditional buildings were all built by local craftsmen and carpenters, mostly from locally sourced material, which are generally low carbon. And many of them also have devised a way to assemble the elements of the building on site, such that it is almost like the first generation of modular construction. We all are familiar with the tangam system of timber construction, where where it's totally metal-free, nail-free, and the timber elements just slot into each other. And of course, most importantly, our vernacular buildings have also proven that they are very resilient to the natural climate around us and have lasted, some of them have lasted 100 years. For instance, the Kampung Laut Old Mosque in Kelantan is also one of the oldest surviving buildings, almost all timber with the hardwood for structure and non-structural components of other Malaysian timber such as merbau. So I do believe, and we all know, that local timber is very much part of our building heritage, something we're very familiar with, all of us. We remember those timber walls, those timber louvers that we grow up with, and it's so much part of our identity and heritage. So continuing the journey, I would like to share some of our own learning from the I think Najwa said, my 30 plus years of practice in Malaysia, and where it has led us to today, some of the issues that I believe need to be addressed, and there's potential to hopefully to work with everyone, top down, bottom up, to be able to do more towards combating climate change. I would like to start with some very early buildings I suppose, to show that it's not really new, but perhaps it's only now that we are more consciously quantifying what we call as green buildings. In early 1999, we had the opportunity to build, to be part of the building of Putrajaya. It was a very exciting time at that time in the late 1990s, and we had a chance to build the temporary bus and taxi terminal, which I show because it's a building that is it doesn't consume hardly any energy at all. It's totally a simple shelter that is very much connected to the outdoor and yet sheltered from the elements. So this is the very sort of basic of sustainable building design, where we have an architecture without walls, and we rely on the natural climate around us to provide the comfort and the shelter. Here is just a simple building with floating roofs and a lot of rain screens to deal with what is a very challenging aspect of our climate. It's not just the heat, but it's sheltering from our seasonal heavy rains. That is a big challenge to how we design for the tropical climate. And even in a bus station building, way back then, 30 years ago, we aspired to already bring the landscape into the space, a space that you normally associate with the hustle and bustle of a station. We also went on to build the Western Transport Terminal, which today is known as Putrajaya Central, where the KLIA Express goes through. And we worked again trying to ensure that it is a naturally ventilated building. So the whole complex actually is naturally ventilated. Only the internalized edifices are air conditioned. So it's very early on that it's almost intuitive to build without a reliance on air conditioning, because in the tropics, we really do not need to keep the interior enclosed and protected from the outdoors. So we must be very well aware that there is actually no need to have a closed environment in most of our spaces, particularly in public buildings. Okay, I wanted to show this project that never happened because it was one of the earliest buildings that we tried very much to celebrate the use of local timber. This is a building. It's an office building with some commercial retail in the core island of Putrajaya. We never had a chance to build it, unfortunately. I wish we did. But right then we already tried to celebrate one of the very precious and valuable resource that we have, which is tropical timber. In Putrajaya, you're all aware that they have very strict urban design guidelines that require you to build arcade around buildings to allow people to walk in a sheltered arcade from building to building. And we wanted to embed in those standard urban design something that will make that connection to our culture or cultural traditions, local materials. So this was a scheme that we envisioned would have a layer of timber on the facade, on the podium facade, but in front of it there is a fritted glass screen that is fritted. It's a pixelated pattern that we derived from batik, typical batik motifs. So when you're further away, you see the motif very clear. Of course, the screen helps to shelter the arcade from the rain and provides some amount of protection also from the sun. Unfortunately, we didn't have a chance to build it. And I'm still looking for an opportunity one day to have something like that, because this was on the main Core Island Boulevard, which we thought was a appropriate place to celebrate batik, which is one of our very precious crafts traditions. Okay, this is how it could work. A layer of timber on the inner part. We were well aware that timber deteriorates with exposure to moisture and to rain. So the glass screen is placed so as to protect the timber and increase its longevity, such that it would be used, so it would be accepted as a good outdoor or semi-outdoor building material. I can tell you it's very, very difficult to convince a client to put timber on the outdoors, because we've been trying for since then, and there are only a few buildings that we have successfully done that. Okay, so one of them, to the credit of our clients at Putrajaya, is the Ministry of Natural Resources. And it being the Ministry of Natural Resources, naturally we wanted to use natural materials that are sourced locally. So we were very determined to be able to showcase some of the very viable building materials that have been underutilized, underappreciated, or maybe even feared to be used. So we we started by at least trying to bring it onto the podium level as movable screens around the podium of the building. Most of our work in Putrajaya works on, has an intention to try to make the city more walkable. Putrajaya was conceived as a garden city, and of course, we probably had hoped that we would be walking more around in Putrajaya. And that's why the urban design guidelines have very strict and very extensive requirements for providing pedestrian ways around buildings. But we felt that there was issues of scale that makes it more difficult for a person to walk around because the blocks were large. And just crossing the road across from one side of the main boulevard to the other is 100 meters from the face of the building to the other. It's quite a substantial distance. So we felt that there was a need to break down the scale of the pathways and the walkways. And in this scheme for Precinct 4, we proposed to carve indoor streets into the block because the blocks were quite large, and it would really make it a lot more walkable. So we proposed it, and the client took the initiative to extend that concept to the buildings around it so that you create a whole precinct that's quite walkable between all these ministry buildings. So all the buildings, even though done by other architects, followed this master plan concept of carving an indoor street to facilitate the people in the buildings to walk a lot more to various to other buildings around it. And we also externalize all the corridors which would otherwise be in the office space, and that usually amounts to 10%. We sort of externalize them out so that there is a lot of activity around the atrium that is created by the indoor street. So you will find this condition in the few ministry buildings that are clustered around in Precinct 4. And we also, way back then, and this building was actually completed in around 2003, I recall, 2004 maybe, or 2006, yeah. So you will be able to find that you will be walking through indoor streets, which are also landscaped in all the 4 buildings in that cluster. Even back then, in the year 2001, when we worked on the design, we were already looking, doing analysis of the sun shading, tracing the movement of the sun, and looking at the thermal performance of the building envelope to start to quantify, you know, the building to ensure that it is not to be efficient. And at that time, we had a lot more software, and a lot less software, and it was really not easy to do, but we were able to make a start on calculating the BEI of buildings even back then. That's 20 years ago. And the buildings in this cluster, all 4 of them, actually have a very good energy performance from the orientation of the building and from the treatment of the facade. And we had actually calculated that the energy consumption of the BEI, as we know it more familiar today, is around 136 kilowatt hours per meter square per year, which at that time we consider quite good. Of course, today the buildings that we can achieve are half of that, which is an amazing step from over 20 years ago. This is the podium where we had the opportunity with the good support of the client he was a little bit worried about maintenance. Every time you propose to use timber, they would always be worried about maintenance. So we made sure that we had a very detailed maintenance program that is put into the operations manual so that they would be able to refurbish the timber properly using the same. I hope they have done that. I'm not quite sure if that's if tenants, in the building, which may change over time, may not upkeep. And that's one of the challenges of doing and using timber in buildings, that it does require some maintenance, but not as much as we all fear. I believe that the timber has probably been refurbished not more than 2 times in the last 20 years. I also wanted to emphasize that we use timber. This was our first attempt to try to use timber on the exterior cladding. And of course, we tried to make it also effective as a sunshade. And this is what I call the 4 o'clock shot, which we like to do when we finish the building, to go back and see whether it is actually doing its job of shading the areas behind it. And you can see this is at 4 o'clock that the corridors, which the arcade and the corridors does enjoy quite a lot of shading from the afternoon sun. Okay, so that's how it looks like. And we were quite happy that we were able to take timber onto the exterior facade of the building. One of our first attempts to put it on a public building of that scale. Continuing this, the indoor street concept, which we feel was very important to create, not to improve walkability in and around the complex of building, but in this one, which is a building of around the same time, we were able to also carve an atrium, a semi-outdoor atrium. It's covered, but it's fully naturally ventilated. Sometimes on a big storm, it may get a little bit of rain, but on most days, it is fully quite well sheltered from the elements. It's just one of those things that we realized when we got the brief to do this corporate headquarters. Then they would give us a whole list of all the office space required for each and every one, and the amount of area to be allocated for the office population. But most often you would see that many briefs may not place as much emphasis or overlook to provide some informal gathering spaces. And I feel that's very important. Sustainability is not just about dealing with the environment, but dealing with the community. And these informal gathering spaces are what sustains the life of the people in these buildings, in this group here, which is DG, quite young people actually. And we were very happy when the building was finished. There were lots of people queuing to go and work there just because they felt that the space was inspiring, and was so it was one of those. It was a bit harder to achieve that in the other building because being government civil servants, they were probably less inclined to indulge in what the younger people at DG did. They actually built a cafe actually around there, and there were lots of the space was highly utilized for informal interactions. We also took the opportunity, as you can see, to again use local timber selectively, and we, as always, on the underside of the main atrium to give it the warmth. So timber is really an amazing amazing building material. And while it is very costly and harder to use it as a structural element, it lends so much to a building in terms of giving it life and giving it warmth. And people naturally gravitate to places that have that warmth and that welcoming feel. So, well, these pictures we took without anybody in it, but usually it's quite filled with people, as you can see in these pictures. Okay, and again, this is a naturally ventilated space. I mean, they have all the air-conditioned space, but people actually like to be in the naturally ventilated space. So all the basics and ingredients that we need to do sustainable buildings are actually all there. It's just a matter of getting out of that mindset that you have to enclose a building something that we probably inherited from the West or the North, and something that we should always try to steer away from with respect to our local climate. This is a building that we did also around that time, completed in 2006. It's a typical corporate office building, and unlike DG, we don't know who's going to stay in there even when it's finished. It's actually at Central, at KL Central. But we found again, we tried again to try and use timber on the building facade, and this is what we were able to achieve. We were able to put up a timber screen, a timber sunshade screen that goes up about 30 stories of this 35-story building, excluding the podium. So to us, that was we were quite happy that we had a client who took, well, I wouldn't say it's a risk, but who dared to do something that is different from the norm. Again, we are well aware that applying timber on a tall building, it would be even more exposed to the natural elements, the rain and the sun. So we took care to ensure that the timber will be protected. So if this is what you would see, it's right in front of the LRT going into KL Central. So if we are in the area and you look up, you will see this soaring facade of timber. And I do believe there are no other facades that have used timber up to this height in a building in Malaysia. So this is quite unique. This was was actually installed in 2005. So it has been some 17 years later now, and it has not been revarnished as far as I know. So it has lasted 17 years. And we also have not been contacted to replace any piece. So I'm really glad that we, together with the contractor, had built a timber facade that has been durable for this period. Still, I believe, looks quite good because we have thought through and to use it selectively, of course, because it's always a little bit more costly than using the normal material. But I do believe it lends a certain warmth and a certain expression of our tropical culture and tropical traditions on a very modern corporate building that would normally be quite, not to say anonymous, but would not have a lot of cultural sort of traditions and expression on it, especially if it were not designed in the postmodern style. Again, the 4 p.m. shot that we always take when we finish after CPC. And I do believe that the timber is not just looking pretty there, but it actually does do its job to shape the office spaces behind. As you can see, we have taken care to protect the timber from excessive rainfall. So it is actually lined with aluminum on the top, a thin layer of aluminum. And that's what have kept the timber dry and well preserved for the last 17 years. From the inside, you will be able to see it when you look up, or when you look down, you will see the aluminum. On the street, you always see the timber when you look up to the building. So I do believe we were able to successfully achieve the utilization of local Malaysian timber on a high-rise building. That was something we really wanted to do, and we thank our clients at MRCB then for supporting our effort. Onto other buildings that we have done. This is more talking about other aspects of sustainability, which I believe is important in every building that we do. This one is the HQ for Air Asia, where we have that central gathering space. No timber here because it's a very cold, well, it's an airport environment. So this building we do have to enclose because of the noise of all the planes, taking off and all. So it is a fully enclosed space. But unfortunately, we were not able to make the place warm, and perhaps it wasn't suited to the corporate identity of the client here. But we had a more playful type of design. The whole atrium feels as if you are under the belly of the plane, instead of walking through an indoor street with landscape and garden. The client also, this was one client that believed in the informal and perhaps unplanned meeting of people and meeting of minds, what he called the bum factor. He wanted, his gauge of the building was to ensure the people who work in this company would have a lot of opportunity to bump into each other and, you know, and come up with and be able to talk informally and come up with great ideas in these unplanned interactions. So that's another aspect, I think, which we want to build into buildings. It's not just sustainable in terms of the quantitative aspect, but also in the life of the building, sustaining communities and the people who live in it. A more recent building, I show this because this one is one of the first building that we were able to achieve a LEED Platinum as well as GBI Platinum. It's met all the numbers that you need to meet. But what to us is very meaningful about this building, besides meeting all the quantitative criteria, is that it does have a very clear response to the environment around it. It is located in Shah Alam, but it's in the city of Shah Alam, and well located next to the lake. So we opted for a low-rise building. This was actually a competition. Everybody else was high-rise. So we were again fortunate to have a client who appreciated a different approach that perhaps may not be so corporate, you know, will not give you a traditional iconic tall building, but a low-rise building that hugged the ground and actually aspired to replenish its own footprint that it would have taken up and to create a park to make up for that loss of green area from its own footprint. As it turned out, part of it then was converted to PV cells, but the total area we consider a good replacement of the footprint that was that the building occupied. So that's the part that climbs up the building, and then the addition of the PV cells. Okay, that's how the part looks like. And the other aspect which we felt was very important, besides the numbers, was that we wanted the building to maintain the continuity of the urban pathways from the city to the left side back to the lake, so that people in the city can still filter through the building, and the building is not a barrier to people enjoying the green area, the public green area beyond the building. 2012, we did this building, which is Menara Binjai, again, another opportunity to test another aspect of a green building design. We actually started the building before the GBI was created. So we had actually started with the green mark, the Singapore green mark by the Singapore BCA. And when the green mark came up, we then also applied for it at the same time. The building is certified green mark gold, but only GBI certified. And we understand that because the criteria are different, the green mark being with a greater emphasis on energy, low energy performance criteria, and less on other factors. So it being quite an efficient energy building scored higher, but perhaps in GBI, there are a lot more areas that you need to you need to score the points literally. So it scored a little bit less. And this is something that you will see the difference in different rating. Nevertheless, it's still a very good performance of 150 kilowatt hour per meter square per year. And the innovative features that we had put in there was again to create outdoor space, albeit in a high rise. So we have created these outdoor gardens that we call urban verandas, where we wanted to bring the garden up the tower. And every 3 floors there is a sky garden, which is also protected from the rain. We saw that in Kuala Lumpur there were many sky gardens. People have been doing sky gardens, but most of them can't be used in the afternoon because usually it rains in the afternoon, and that's the time actually you want a little break from the from your work routine. So we created this permeable wall that allows the sky garden to ventilate, but will give quite good protection from the rain, so that it's usable even on a rainy day. So it's a small little thing to do, but of course there is value in it because the floors that were tenanted first were all the floors that had direct access to the sky garden. So you can see that often when we design, there's some resistance to in adding features such as this sky gardens and verandas because the owner or the operator may look at it as additional maintenance. But actually what it brought was that tenants were willing to pay a premium for those floors, and they were the first to be leased out. So there is value in creating the so-called space that is not used fully all the time, but it is obviously something that urban working population would enjoy as a relief from being at the desk. Oh, I forgot to mention that this building was actually built on the site of an old colonial bungalow, and we had actually kept all the trees. We actually kept the trees for about 3 years before we were ready to put them on the building. The contractor was about to charge us a rental because he said this had been sitting here in his warehouse for a long time. But we were and the client luckily was also committed to it. So we salvaged every tree that was on the premises and use them as much as we can in the building. Of course, it's not enough to do what we did in the earlier building, but we used them internally. Also, it was a species we were a little less familiar with. I think it was some African species that were planted there long ago. So we used it, most of it in a sheltered area, in the lift cars and in the main reception lobby, and some of it in the sunshade fins that's on the roof garden. Here's a view of what's it like behind the permeable breathable wall that we created on every 3 floors where the verandas are. This is one of them where the tenant even took the effort to put in a timber deck to make it feel a little bit more outdoors. And this is the urban veranda, we call it, which is the roof garden that is actually can be utilized by anyone in the building. So this is our way to just lend a bit of the life that we can have living in a tropical environment, and not to be in a fully closed building. You know, I spent quite a few years living and working in New York, where it's everything is so enclosed. So to me, it's very special that we have the privilege, if we took it, to create outdoor spaces to relieve the sort of closed hermetic office environment. Another building that we had done, which also is GBI Gold and Green re-rated, is the Menara Etika in Jalan Bangsa. Here, while we were not able to bring the garden up the building, we were at least able to use it to relieve the typical dreary podium facade. Another building that we completed more recently that's also has a very low BEI. You can see these BEI values are half of what we first started with in 2006. So in a matter of 10, 12 years, we are able to bring down the building energy index, which is the amount of energy used by the building, to half of what it typically would use. some 10, 15 years ago. And actually that translates to a saving of about ringgit per year in energy running costs. Another building that we just recently completed, which is also LEED Platinum and LEED and GBI Platinum, has even the lowest that we've achieved, which is around 62, and that's without counting the PV cells. With the PV cells, it actually can achieve around 57 kilowatt hour per meter square per year, which is quite a stretch from where we started 15, 20 years ago. So that's the buildings that are rated green. But we actually also, you will find that most architects will also need to, may not be able to have clients who want to go for rating, and you wouldn't be able to quantify so accurately your performance of the building. And there are many such buildings, but we believe that one should never, one should still strive to achieve some amount of sustainable performance, albeit not quantified and certified. This is the Star Residence, which is 3 towers in KLCC. But I think besides the building, which is, it's quite standard already, and we know what to do on selecting the glass and orienting the building. Our attention in the city center turned to what we feel is another equally important aspect of sustainable design, is the relationship of the building to the street, and to do its part to improve the quality of the sidewalks, the quality of the street, and in doing so, to be able to encourage more people to walk and increase and facilitate the walkability that we need so much in our city center, to be able to truly to be able to mitigate climate change from all the fossil fuels that we use in our cars and vehicles. I think today I did not put in those slides, but by now, since we started building the LRT, now the LRT1, LRT2, MRT1, MRT2, and MRT3 coming up, we actually have a lot of the urban metro rail infrastructure already in the city. If you compare to what Singapore has in relation to the population, we are actually close to being at par with Singapore and with Seoul. I'm sorry, I didn't show those slides today. And so our biggest battle is no longer putting in the infrastructure, it is getting people on the trains. So I believe it's very important that every development does its part to make it easy for people to access it with the train, the metro rail system, and to make to do their bit on their own frontage to contribute to the walkability of the street and of the city. So in this building, which was not a usual opportunity we have, the land actually has a 200-meter street frontage on a very major road, Jalan Yap Kwan Sing, that leads right to the Petronas Towers. And you can see what it was when we first started building. It's a narrow sidewalk, very bumpy, and you'll have a lamppost suddenly intrude into the walkway, uneven curbs and all. So what we wanted to do is to take this golden opportunity where you have the opportunity to improve the quality of the sidewalk along 200 meters. One of the obstacles to walkability is that with our island planning that comes from our firefighting concept, firefighting strategy, where we expect the fire truck to have to go around the building. So every building becomes an island and separated by driveways. So you can never walk too far before you have to encounter a driveway. And here's one more rare opportunity where we have 200 meters, and we thought we must make this nicely walkable. So we actually set the building back a little more than the minimum, put place some budget on achieving good landscaping and finishes on there to be able to encourage more people to walk. And actually, a lot of people already walk, but it's not exactly a pleasant walk before, very narrow, and then you also have like food trucks and the food itinerant food stalls coming up at lunchtime. So this is we hope will set the standard for the rest of the street along Jalan Yap Kwan Sing to allow people to walk and connect these two very major thoroughfares, which is Jalan Tun Abdul Razak and Jalan Ampang. Because it's actually not that far. I have walked this many times because I have often got out of my car. Our office used to be at the corner of Jalan Ampang. I have many times got out of my car and walked the rest of the way because it takes only 10 minutes actually to walk from Jalan Tun Razak to Jalan Ampang along this stretch. But it's something that people tend not to do because of the hazards that you may face in the sidewalk as it is now. But hopefully, within the next 10 years, as other buildings develop, that this will have a chance to, the whole sidewalk environment will be much improved. And to me, this is quite important that every team of architects and engineers, when they see the chance to not have this island thinking, because sustainability cannot be an island all within the building, but need to extend and be more holistic, to engage the streets, to engage the entire urban public realm, to make it to make our cities more livable and more walkable. I just wanted to share this project, which is another project. We had a chance to celebrate timber, and I was looking forward to have a chance to share this with the Malaysian Timber Council and its friends and associates. This is a building we just finished, just at the during the middle of the pandemic. It's a resort hotel and service apartments in Penang at Teluk Bahang. Teluk Bahang is almost the end of the road on the northern part of the island after Feringgi. And we had a very long and linear site, so we took the opportunity to create a very nice hotel where everyone has a view of the sea. But I wanted to show this just to share with you what we really enjoyed is the opportunity to really showcase the beauty of our local Malaysian timber. And all of this is recycled timber that were obtained from one of the timber suppliers. I'm sure many of you may know him. Normally, he supplies a lot, I think, for homes, but not often. We also thank the client for supporting our proposal to have the arrival foyer to be finished completely in recycled timber. Well, there's a little bit of new timber added on one side, but it's most of it is recycled timber, all from the northern part of Malaysia. Telegraph poles and timber decking, jetty decking, etc. So that was another opportunity to celebrate our local Malaysian timber. Our new building, Oxley, which is in KLCC. I wanted to show this not because of the building, but again because of what every building can do to do the bit in the in improving our streets and urban environment. This is KLCC, where there's a lovely master plan that was done in 1990 by Cletus Cartervale, but envision a ring of buildings around and a wonderful park which has really remade KL, remade Kuala Lumpur as a global city. But one of the things we felt that could be improved was access to the park. But we never had a chance really to build in this place for a long time because I always like to show this because it is really hard to have an opportunity to build here. You've got Petronas Towers and all these famous architects from all over the world. Caesar Pelli, Norman Foster, SOM, everybody has been here, Philip Cox, Adas. So we were wondering when we'll get a chance to deal, because it's actually right at the front door of our office, which is across the road. But one day after 20 years of looking at it, we had the opportunity to have a client to have the good faith to engage us to do a building around here, surrounded by all these international architects. And the first thing that we wanted to do, not so much to create an iconic building, was to address the walkability issue and create a path through the building to get to the park, because there are not that many routes to the park. So we wanted to set the example that every building should be more permeable to allow people from the other side to get access, and in fact sheltered access to get to the park. So it's because in the park also there is the mosque, and there is a lot of people walking around to get to the park and the mosque every Friday. So there's a lot of foot traffic, and I think every building can do that bit to provide and enhance the walkways around there. But I don't need to show that. I think I'll skip all that. This is just the motifs that we carried. This is a small project that we did in Penang quite a while back. And again, we just tried to retain as much, even though it's not in the core heritage zone, which is highly controlled, we opted to keep quite a few of the old elements in the building, but insert new elements that were sympathetic to it. It's also one of the things we wanted to do was to again bring light back into the shop house. And I think this is all part of sustainability. It's not just a performance, a project that's small. You wouldn't have consultants to calculate, the energy consumption and assist the design team. So a lot of it's intuitive, and we were able to what we wanted to do and were able to achieve is to bring light and ventilation back into a lot of shop houses that had been closed up, to create more area, to create more protection from rain. And this is one example where we opened up, we took away all the roof covers that were built over the years. This building is actually from the 1910s. And so it's a matter of removal of the things that were obstructing a more sustainable quality of environment inside the shop houses. So it is sometimes a matter of reduction rather than building to make. Again, we use timber because we here in this building in Penang, we wanted to recall some things that we dear to our memory of Penang, like the clan jetties along the coast of Penang. So the corridors are treated like floating jetties to the rooms. And we're very glad that we were able to do something which I think has been lost from many shop houses, which is to bring in natural daylight and natural ventilation into every room in this one lot hotel. So that's our inspiration to look at these narrow walkways that floated over the water. And this is a space that is often used for arts and performance. I brought this up also. I would like to probably finish with this project. Maybe some of you may have been there, the Saloma Link Bridge, which is something that we had built and was completed just during the pandemic. And the importance of it is, again, not its iconic impact, whether you like it or not. It is really the most important thing to us for this project is the connectivity it created for pedestrians between the precinct of KLCC and Kampong Baru, which was separated by not just the river, but by the placement of the Akli Highway, I think in the early 80s or late 70s, when traffic was very bad in KL, and it was the right thing to do then. But I think it also, at the same time, cut off a very vibrant part of Kuala Lumpur, which is KLCC, from another part of KL, which is very precious to us, to all KL people, which is Kampong Baru. We felt that it would be important to connect this part of the whole sustainability of the city. And we had the opportunity to do a small master plan for them quite some years back. And this was one of the proposals to make a pedestrian connection between the two very important precincts. Our client used to call it Antara Dua Dajat these days, that there are these two different precincts, and we really propose that the first thing that should be done, no matter what you do to the entire master plan, and there have been many master plans, is to try to restore a link across the bridge, because historically, before the highway was there, it did exist. There were a couple of small wooden bridges that existed from the early 20th century, or no, the late 19th century. And the one, there was even one that was quite near to the Muslim cemetery there, where the people in the village of Kampung Baru would actually carry their deceased over across the wooden bridge to the cemetery there. So we were able to have this unique opportunity to actually build a bridge with a budget that they had dedicated to the Peribadanan Kampung Baru. And this bridge actually helps to, with this bridge, you are now able to walk from KLCC to the Masjid Jamek within 10 to 15 minutes, 10 if you're fast, 15 if you're taking your time and taking views, taking shots of KLCC. A walk which would otherwise be 30, 40 minutes across many busy intersections in the city. So we do believe that that's the value of the link there, and that it would be a catalyst towards more development on that side of Kampung Baru. There have been many, so I will not go into the details of that. And I would lastly just want to end on one point about another opportunities that we can to make our cities, our buildings and our streets more sustainable. After the pandemic, buildings take a long time to do. This project was started in 2009, due to finish by early next year. So that's a whole 12, 13 years, to deliver a building. And so happened that this building, was half constructed during the pandemic and would run its course to finish after that. And we felt that after the pandemic, there is a change of values, a change of needs that we should recognize. Buildings take a long time, and it's really hard to change anything because of the nature of the SPA that the developer signs with the purchasers. There are about 1,500 units here, so there are a lot of units. And there are also 30 sky gardens. And when we got back to work after the pandemic, the first thing we did was to tell the client, I think we should change some of these sky gardens. Actually, there are 30 of them, 10 in each tower, so that you don't need to walk more than 2 floors to get to a garden area in a very otherwise dense development. We felt that instead of the ornamental gardens that we had, we had Balinese garden, herb garden, Japanese garden, that we should actually try to encourage urban farming in the gardens that actually receive enough sunlight. So we did all the analysis to show which were the frontages that will receive enough daylight and sunlight to be able to sustain some planting, herbs and small fruit trees and some simple vegetables, tomatoes, chilies, things that would give us a lot of pleasure. And that's something that we probably discovered after the pandemic. But and I think this is something that all of us need to contribute to resolve. Because of the SPA, the parties involved, developer, would be very, very reluctant to change anything, even if it seemed to be for the better, and arose because of changing conditions, because of what was signed ahead. So there you are, you only develop a site once. Once, maximum twice. There were low-rise buildings on the site before. But to me, every building is the end game. You're not going to have a chance to build it again if a building is that dense and has that many basements. This one actually has 2.5 basements. But if most typical buildings with 5-story basement, you're not likely to be able to safely and economically reconstruct the building like they do in Hong Kong, because they don't have basement car parks there. So even though we did all the design to convert the landscaping from ornamental landscape to productive landscaping, to productive farming, productive urban farming, just because of the obligations of that, and perhaps the fear of lack of acceptance from the eventual residents in this community, we could not proceed with it. And I find that a great loss of opportunity because of that. So it takes many parties, I think, to make things work. And in this case, to build more flexibility into this contract so that we are not locked into designing something that may be suddenly, in an unexpected way, like it did happen with the pandemic, be made, the conditions have changed such that there are changes that are crying out to be done, but we are locked in because of a contract. So I raised this up because I hope the parties who hear this would perhaps look into that to ensure that that there is opportunity to do good changes to buildings, because the gestation period is so long, to make sure that they are updated. I'll skip this. This one is an urban park that we did on this building. It's a very dense development, but we've already, the building has done its bit to set back 4 times more than the required setback on the front to create an urban plaza, as well as besides the 10 the 30 sky gardens in the development. I will probably end there. This was the last one I wanted to do, which is also about revisiting planning regulations that are an obstruction to achieving greater level of sustainability and obstacles to improving the quality of our streets and sidewalks and the urban realm. Is something like the greening requirements, which are very standardized. You just have to put a ring of green around every building, making it further an island. It's already islanded by the driveway, and now furthermore by another ring of green. And many times in the city, this ring of green stands in the shadow of tall buildings, so it does not really thrive at all. So it's I feel it's a lost opportunity again, and that we should be rethinking this policy right away to ensure that whatever green we put into the city is productive, does its part to to sequester carbon and not just be ornamental but be productive. So and this is my my message to people who can make a difference here, people in planning and our surveyors who are the first parties at the apportioning of land parcels. That there are a lot of to-dos. It's not just in the design of buildings, but everyone has a role to play, planners, surveyors, town planners, local authorities, and the clients themselves. So I hope I've shared my bit. We are all very passionate about timber in our office, and I'm very happy to have the chance and thank the Malaysian Timber Council again for this opportunity to share our journey and experience with trying to promote our wonderful local timber in our industry and in building and construction. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Architect Lillian, for that very insightful presentation. So now we will proceed with our Q&A session. Just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, you may type your questions at the Q&A box or at the chat box. We will get through as many questions as possible. So let's take a look. There's one question from the chat box from Mr. Nasruddin. He asks, okay, congratulations, Architect Lillian and Veritas, for having successfully designed various buildings with sustainable characteristics. But how do you or your client evaluate the extent of the effectiveness of this sustainability of the building design after it is completed and occupied?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think well, the good thing about green certification is that it is quantitative. You actually count every square meter of and every cubic meter of air that goes to the air conditioning. So the numbers speak for themselves when you have gone through the process. So for that, it is good if they are committed to go for the rating. If they are not, then we do a more intuitive, intuitive approach, where we know that it will happen, but we may not have the exact number. We don't know whether the BI is 56.5 or whether it's just roughly in the realm of 100 to 150. So the way to do it would be to be able to convince them to spend that extra money upfront, because to build to do a green buildings, it could cost about maybe 1 to 3% more than the cost that you would otherwise spend, because you will be using improved insulation, improved glass materials, and green rated products as well. I think the examples of successful building that you can quote and share with them is also a way to convince them. Like I mentioned in Menara Binjai, where the floors with the not so highly utilized garden, meaning it's not used from 9 to 5, were the first to be leased out. They were the floors to be, in demand, the preferred floors. So if we had more sessions like this where we shared, perhaps we are able to share all the experiments that every architect does. Every architect is always very keen to test out new ways, slightly different ways to improve how we did it the last time. If there were more sharing sessions, perhaps you could take your client there, and I've done quite a few visits for even for radar. I've brought them to Menara Binjai once or twice. So sharing helps so that they can look at other built examples that are the best testimony of what sustainable buildings will achieve for you. We must quantify the savings. I showed you that one of our office towers saves ringgit 500,000 a year actually it's a month. That was a typo, in electricity bills. So keeping records, I think, of the good performance of buildings that had the opportunity to be certified would be a good guide. And also what you learn from that, even though it's building may not be certified, you know that those are the specs, and you would be able to use similar materials and save them the cost, at least, of the green consultant, in achieving a green performing building without a rating.
Okay, next question.
No, and another thing that I wanted to say, we did the W actually that you see in this picture here. It's also a green rated building, and it's got amazing thermal performance on the glass. And I remember being at the launch for the units. The emphasis on marketing is all on the furniture, the styling, of course being a W. But what perhaps will be impactful to buyers in the future, because I think our buyers are a lot more engaged with the whole, climate change and issues, is that actually when you walk into the apartment, you actually do not feel it's hot. Often when you've been out for the day, aircon is off, and you walk into the apartment, it'll be hot, and you quickly have to rush and put the aircon on. But in this building, when you walk in, you forget to switch on the aircon because the insulation is good. You hardly actually need the aircon, the air condition, and you will not have to have that rush, of trying to cool down the building as soon as you cool down your apartment. So I said that even the marketing team has a role to play to sell it to the purchasers that it's not the furniture and the marble on the counter on the toilets, but to say that this is what it is. You walk into this building, it's into your apartment, you don't need to turn on the aircon. Done. Yeah, so that's just sharing our experience with one building. When the quality of the facade is good, that's the benefit you get, and to ensure that it gets to the people that counts, like the marketing people. I do know that many purchasers don't sort of think, when they go to a launch, they are not asking like, how how much electricity is this unit going to incur each year. But if you had those numbers, then we will start to cultivate better knowledge, and hopefully one day the purchasers will appreciate the benefits they get from it, and not just look at the furniture.
All right. Hope that answer your question, Mr. Nasruddin. Okay, so next from Mr. Ng Sehban. What is the species of timber that you have used at One Central KL and also DGHQ? What is the cost had been spent for the entire timber facade at One Central?
Gee, we did it so long ago, I can't remember the cost, but it's balau. In One Central, I think it was all local Malaysian timber balau. But I know today the supply is less and they will be getting the balau from Indonesia, more likely. I don't think it was substantially more than having the whole shading screens to be in aluminum. After all, if you're buying in timber from Malaysia in ringgit, compared to using aluminum today, with the exchange rate as it is, I'm sure that that gap will close even further. I'm sorry, if I have your number, I'll try and look it up, but I don't recall the cost then. Certainly it would be a lot, it'll be a bit lower than now today, because we are not in the practice of farming, of growing and replanting and replenishing the timber that we extract from our forests, which is unfortunate. We're only interested in planting short-lived, short cycle plants for pulp production, instead of having more long-term managed farming that will ensure that we have a good supply sufficient for the needs, for local needs. I do understand even at that time that a lot of our timber that can be used, that could be used in building construction in Malaysia, is actually exported to countries like Japan, Korea. A lot actually goes out of the market so that they can build with those timber there. I think the airport in Oslo is lined with merbau from Malaysia, for instance, and probably a lot of the wonderful buildings we see on Dizine probably has timber that has come from the forests of Kalimantan and Borneo.
Okay, next question from Simon Law. Do you mind to share your view on higher usage of timber in buildings in Malaysia, such as for structural use, cross-laminated timber, for example?
Well, I think cross-laminated timber is structurally very efficient, but I am not sure whether we have been fabricating it enough to support greater use of it. I believe it's quite expensive now. I believe the Malaysian Pavilion at the Expo in Milan some years ago used cross-laminated timber as structure. In Malaysia, the challenges would be, of course, the fire rating and the cost. For internal use, I'm sure it can be easily used, but I think a first step, an easy first step, would be to use it non-structurally, because I mean the fire rating. Of course, timber has quite a good fire rating. It is hardwood because it takes a while to burn through it, probably longer than aluminum. But I am not that familiar with the cost. It's not something that we manufacture here or is available for the local building market as much. I wish we had the opportunity to do that. It will be costly, I believe, and that's why we have so far, I mean, costly in the sense of the cost that we recognize today. We sometimes don't assign a cost to the limestone hills and the forest that needs to be cleared to create, to make cement for concrete construction. If you assign a cost to that, the loss of green coverage in our forests, I'm sure concrete construction is not as cheap as it may seem today. It's cheap only because we may not have yet assigned a value to the loss of forest.
Next from Mr. Peter Fitch. What would be the best way to introduce, promote, and verify a new sustainable green material to architects and specifiers?
Well, to build a small structure, yourself, that's always the best testimony, use it in your own home, do it in a small project such that it is quickly visible. Most people need to see it to believe it, so that would be the case. And to ensure that it also does not pose any issues with building regulations. I know that people will have concern on using timber on the building facade, for instance, so you have to be very careful to ensure that the timber is not continuous, such that if it caught fire, there is a gap, a bridge, not a bridge, a stop, sort of, to ensure it doesn't just spread continuously, like the type of fires that you see in Dubai, where in the curtain wall, flammable material is potentially continuous all the way up the building, and it creates fires that are harder to control because it grows so quickly. So there are also the safety aspect you have to deal with, especially with timber. People always think that, it will, actually the fire rating timber is quite good, or hard wood. It takes quite a while to burn through, but there is still the fear that it's more easily combustible. Actually, a light steel truss will probably fail a lot earlier with its thin elements because it fails very quickly.
Okay, actually, we received a lot of questions, but unfortunately, the time is running out. So I have to pick one last question of the day. So next, the last question will be from Mr. Eric Fu. Is the difference of weather for each country be critical impact to the timber buildings?
Yes, definitely. As I had pointed out earlier, one of the challenges to timber is constant exposure to rain and damp conditions that cause the timber to age. So if you were in a drier country, probably you will not face that challenge as much. And I think also what's needed is that the supporting industries are needed. Like whenever we are looking for a sealant, we only mostly able to choose from sealants that come from temperate countries, and we never know the performance on tropical, local Malaysian timber. So I wish, and perhaps MTC can also take the initiative on this, to push a bit more on developing finishing for our timber, such that we don't have to have a question when when we read the specs that it may not necessarily work as well for our tropical timber, because the timber is the sealant is developed for like pine or some other type of temperate wood species. So if there were more of these supporting industries willing to invest in research for all the steps that we need to promote more timber, that certainly would be a way to cross these obstacles. I think they are not major obstacles, just needed to have people committed to it, because I do believe we can. I mean, people are thinking of bamboo. There is already a few individuals that are starting to farm bamboo for maybe lower rise construction. So the movement has started, and it needs people across different sectors of the whole building industry to chip in their respective areas. Like I said, to develop and research and develop ceiling materials, and the sort of accessories that are needed for that. Besides, of course, training and cultivating a pride in working with timber. Timber is something that I know. I know a lot of people are actually very excited about making things from timber, and if we can carry that excitement to the classroom and have more people trained, let's say in vocational school, to be passionate about carpentry, and and learning from the last remaining tokos that we have in Kelantan or in East Malaysia, who are still knowledgeable about traditional system like the tanggam system, that we should catch them before they all disappear. I think I wish we had a guild that will collect all these, and that's how we have these sort of trade guilds in France and Italy. They have guilds for everything. Gold making, just doing gilt work, doing plastering work. And if we had these guilds, it will gather the people who are interested to have the critical mass to be able to sustain the interest and develop all the supporting parts and accessories needed. Our role is just the first one to try and promote the use, but we need all these people in the manufacturing industry and the building manufacturing industry to support and to start quantifying the cost to the planet of clearing forests for production of cement, for instance.
Okay, thank you so much, Lillian, for answering all the questions. We have come to the end of our webinar session today, and before I end this session, is there any final words from you, Lillian, to the audience?
Oh, I think I've said enough. But if there are some questions that that I can answer for those who are keen, you are welcome to write to me by email. It's easy. You can just put my name, lillian.tay@gmail.com. That's easy. If that's easy to remember, and I can try and answer questions. And if they are like-minded people who are interested, we can hopefully find ways to do our bit and part in our respective sectors to be able to work towards more appreciation and more greater usage of a resource that is endemic to us, And I think MTC is certainly one of the. We could do a workshop with the MTC could run more multi-sector workshops where architects, people in manufacturing and doing all the things that will be needed. We could do a workshop on this.
Yeah, that's why we are doing this Timber Talk, to connect with the architects, with the specifiers and so on, Okay, on behalf of Malaysia Timber Council, we would like to thank architect Lillian for taking her time to share her knowledge and insights at this webinar. And for your information, there will be a live feedback poll and survey for all participants after this webinar. So it will be very grateful if you could kindly answer and give your feedback for us to improve our future events. And as mentioned earlier, this recording will be put into our YouTube channel, MTC Timber TV. So please check it out later. And as you wish to know any updates regarding on MTC, you may also follow our social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as our website. We have various activities lined up for this year and upcoming year, next year. So please check them out to get the latest updates related to MTC and also timber industry. So I hope you find this session insightful, and thank you everyone once again for joining us today. I hope you have learned and enjoyed this presentation, and see you again next year in our MTC Timber Talk series. So this concludes our webinar session today. Thank you all for attending, and may you have a wonderful day ahead. Take care and stay safe. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Naja, and thank you everyone for joining this session today. I'm very humbled.